Hi, my name's WillE. I'm going to be looking back at each class in vanilla and answering a very simple question. Was it any good though? Today we have the Shaman. Here's the points I'm going to be looking at. The leveling experience, how good they were at it and how fast they could level. The class quests, what were they for and how well they fit. PvE, dungeon and raid performance. PvP, open world or battlegrounds. And tier sets, the effects they had as well as the looks. Earth, wind, water and fire. The Shaman is the Horde exclusive class and is represented well in almost all of their races. Trolls with their voodoo, Tauren with their totemic buildings, and Orcs with the war chief Thrall, who is himself a Shaman. Shamans brought some truly unique group utility and provided so many different buffs it's hard to keep count. They were overall more of a supportive class and fit the role thematically very well. Let's get started looking at the Shaman's journey through leveling. So the first thing to cover is that Shaman leveling is more non-linear than other classes. There's so many weapon enchants, totems, shocks, weapon skills. Which is best? Well, the simple answer is it depends. Essentially, you want to cut back to using the bare minimum of spells which allow fast grinding without going out of mana constantly. Searing Totem, Flame Shock, and to a lesser degree Lightning Shield are some of your most mana efficient per damage spells available. How about weapon imbues though? Well, generally I found is from 1 to 30, use a one hand and a shield with Rockbiter weapon until you unlock Flame Tongue weapon and then use that instead of Rockbiter, preferably on a fast weapon like a dagger. Post level 30, use Wind Fury for a one-hander or a fast two-hander and Rockbiter for a slow two-handed weapon. Rockbiter scales better with slow two-handed weapons and Wind Fury will likely overkill enemies by a large margin, whereas it will have more chances to proc and less chances to overkill on a fast two-handed weapon. This is all pretty sort of min-max stuff though. Honestly, if it was me, I just want to use a big slow two-hander with Wind Fury. You know, I want to see those big crits to spice up leveling a bit. Shaman also learned Earthbind Totem early on, which could be used to kite enemies between your attacks, meaning you always trade one for one hit. Ghost Wolf was one of the abilities that made Shamans really good, and I would aim to pick this up and the talented version as early as you can. As I constantly mention in these videos, movement speed is your best stat while leveling, and by level 20 you could have 2 out of 2 in improved Ghost Wolf, bringing its cast time down from 3 seconds to 1, and Ghost Wolf provided a 40% movement speed buff, but was only usable outdoors. Also, a quick shout out to the fact Shamans could cast both water breathing and water walking, though both of them cost some materials. Try and see if you can keep a few of these materials handy from the auction house, who knows when they may come in useful. Also, Astral Recall basically counted as a second Hearthstone with a shorter cooldown. And finally, let's not forget Reincarnation or their number of healing spells. Shamans were very adept leveling class who had a bit of flexibility in all corners. Their only limiting factor really was their mana pool. It was more worth keeping an eye out for spirit gear on Shamans more so than other classes, since at the start of the fight you'd normally go Lightning Shield, Flame Shock, Searing Totem, then auto-attack the mob until it's down, and then repeat this cycle. This auto-attacking downtime will be more than 5 seconds and will allow the regen from your spirit to kick in, keeping your mana bar a bit more healthy and you going longer without needing to stop. The Shaman's class quests were mainly based around their totems. You couldn't just place a totem down because you'd learned it from the class trainer. You actually needed a physical totem representing that element in your bag. The first totem came very early at level 4. This sent you out on a short mission to earn your Earth Totem, which enabled abilities like Earthbind or Stoneclaw totems to be used. Earth Totems were largely used for utility and reducing damage taken. Next up, at level 10, was the Call of Fire to unlock your Fire Totem. This is another relatively short quest taking place around the Barrens area. Since you're still such a low level, nothing's too far apart yet, though there is a fair bit of back and forth to gather reagents, eventually ending in defeating a fire elemental. Fire totems are things like Searing Totem or Magma Totem, and most of them exist to increase your damage done. The Water Totem's up next at level 20. Once again, this quest starts in Barrens near Ratchet, and there's a little catch with this one though. The quest doesn't take place in the Barrens as the other ones do. It takes place in Silver Pine Forest, which is about as far away as it possibly can be from your current location. There isn't really a good way of getting there at level 20 either. It would most likely involve getting a boat from Ratchet to Booty Bay, running to Gromgorrel base camp through Stranglethorn Dale, through many mobs that will be able to 1 or 2 shot you, then taking a Zeppelin over to Brill and then running all the way down to the quest location. If you are dead set on locking totems as you receive them, get a mage friend to portal you to Undercity, save yourself some hassle. And many people opt to do this quest at later levels, as water totems are more aimed at group rather than personal utility, and they'll be the ones that you tend to use the least while leveling. Water totems are focused on regenerating stats and debuff removal and include things like Mana Spring or Poison Cleansing Totem. Finally, at level 30, the Air Totem. This is a pretty straightforward quest. It's like a pilgrimage to earn your final totem. Air Totem filled a number of roles, but it also unlocked your most powerful totem by far. The totem that suddenly made you the best friends with every rogue and warrior in the land, Wind Fury Totem, which gave any attack a chance to proc an extra hit with bonus attack power. Following this, there was the standard Sunken Temple quest at level 52, giving some gear, and finally a quest at level 60 in Scholarmance that awarded the Sky Fury Helm. An epic from a quest reward is pretty rare, so this was definitely a nice piece to get hold of. To recap, I'm a big fan of the decisions to make totems actual things you carry, something tangible, enable the use of the totemic abilities. For me, the Shaman quests feel the class fantasy really well, and since they're basically mandatory, it's a good job they're well done. So let's take a look at how the Shaman performed in PvE encounters. Well, if it wasn't clear yet, Shamans are one of the hybrid classes, and just like the Paladin or the Druid, they took hits on performance in order to provide valuable buffs to their party. Dungeon-wise, they were fine, the totems could hit the whole group, and a bit of off-healing never goes amiss. However, things were different in raids. So I want to start off by talking about Shaman's role in raid as a whole, rather than going straight into specialization specifics, because whatever spec you're playing, there'll be certain things that you are always doing. This is related to your totems. As any Shaman, you will be in a group and keeping your assigned totems up at all times. This is the main reason people will bring you to a raid, whether it's with melee, healers or casters. I'll go into this in more detail later. You also had 3 resistance totems, Frostfire and Nature, which were all very beneficial for certain fights. Finally, you had Strength of Earth, a nice strength buff, and Grace of Air for an agility buff. These totems would be relevant on every fight in some form, and they were a key reason you brought a Shaman to the raid. So on to more specifics now. Let's start with Enhancement. And honestly, I'm having more difficulty saying good things about Enhancement than I did with Boomkins. That's really where we are here. Whilst it is a great leveling spec, once you hit raids, it has a pretty dramatic fall. Simply put, Shamans are there for totems, and having enough mana to maintain your totems, whilst using DPS abilities and itemizing to put damage out, just didn't really exist. You could only do one or the other, and even if hypothetically you did spend all your mana on doing damage, you'd still be nowhere near the top. So unfortunately, it was a bit of a struggle for the Enhancement Shaman. Don't lose all hope though. There is a niche for Enhancement in raids that involve Nightfall, a 2-handed axe with a proc that increases spell damage taken on the target by 15% for 6 seconds. Often this would be done by the off-tank warriors, but you could argue for having an Enhancement Shaman in the group too. Wind Fury procs increase the chance for Nightfall to apply. On top of this, the Shaman could spec into elemental weapons and flurry, boosting the damage from Wind Fury for the party and their own attack speed occasionally. The extra attacks from Wind Fury also meant extra threat for the tanks too, so it all synergized up really nicely. I'll give you a quick example of what a spec looked like. So this spec allows you to pick up all the improved support totems. Storm Strike isn't really likely to be taken for 2 reasons. Number 1, it costs a huge amount of mana that you need to be saving for your totems, and B, your raid lead probably doesn't want a debuff slot taken up by this spell. Going Restoration allows you to get Nature's Guidance, which is a flat 3% hit for all attacks and spells, which is fantastic. Also, you get Nature's Swiftness, and a well-timed Nature's Swiftness into a heal could save a tank easily. Going that extra mile is what you need to do to secure your raid spot with this spec. Moving on to ZG and AQ40, where hopefully you're able to get hit cap without Nature's Guidance, you can move the points over from Restoration into Elemental, giving you a bit more damage and mana efficiency through Elemental Focus, but still nothing really compared to the top DPS classes. So despite all this, overall the spec just isn't really good. Hunters spamming rank 1 Wing Clip are better at proccing Nightfall, and Resto Shamans can fulfill the totem role just as well while providing strong healing. If you have your eye on Enhancement for the endgame PvE, make sure your guild doesn't mind you playing it first of all. and get yourself Nightfall. And now I'm going to go off on a side note and talk for far too long about Enhancement tanking. Dungeons, 10-mans, off-tanking, main tank, what was the limit? I strongly believe Blizzard intended Enhancement to be a tanking specialization. It makes sense after all, right? Paladins had tank, heal and DPS, so it should only be logical that the Horde counterpart should also have the ability to tank, heal and DPS, at least that makes sense to me. Vanilla was an experimental time, and after all, Enhancement has a little bit of everything thrown into the talent tree, to the extent where you could see them being a tank in theory. Extra armor, dodge, parry. There was also Guardian totems and shield specialization, but it appears these were not more important than having extra mana, or just putting out more damage and consequently more threat. Speaking of threat, Shamans have a decent way to pull in Chain Lightning and 2 abilities that generate bonus threat in Rockbiter, which would go off their auto attacks, and Earthshock, meaning their single target threat generation wasn't actually bad. And they also put out respectable damage in both single target and AoE. So what are the issues for Enhancement tanking? Well, first of all, armor. You're wearing mail, other tanks are wearing plate, and other tanks also have the 10% boost in armor from talents. Druids have an extra 360% armor contribution from their items in dire bear form, so you've got the least armor. This means you have the weakest physical mitigation, and physical damage was frequently the main source of damage you were going to be taking. This combined with being vulnerable to crushing blows and critical strikes means you could drop very quickly. Next issue's no taunt. Your aggro is based off causing enough threat to overtake the main tank or being the highest threat target, and your only real option is Earthshock, which can be an issue since some enemies are immune to nature damage. Finally, you have a mana bar. No mana means no spells, which means very little aggro, and you had to manage mana carefully as an Enhancement tank, and they were gear dependent. All tanks were of course, but you had less help from talents compared to other tanks, as well as needing stats for hit, spell damage, avoidance and mana regen. And with all this said, enhanced tanking was by no means optimal, but it could be done, especially in 5-mans and even 10-man dungeons. As for raids, off-tanking low physical mitigation fights was a possibility. Of course, you're going to have to put a whole lot more effort in to perform basically worse than any warrior could, but if you really want to do it, it is an option and can be done. So on to Elemental now, and it's a similar story to Enhancement unfortunately. Everything you can do, a Restoration Shaman can do too, whilst healing. On top of this, you don't have the benefit of scraping some damage from auto attacks and maintaining totems like Enhancement does. Elemental spells are quite expensive too, and you can't really afford to do anything other than Lightning Bolt, which is fine on short duration fights where your damage can actually be okay. However, on longer fights, down ranking and even mana pots will be necessary to keep the Lightning Bolt spam going. On top of this, your fire totems, which are some of your most efficient damage sources, aren't going to be doing anything against most enemies in Molten Core and Blackwind Lair due to the very high fire resist. An Elemental Shaman would look something like this. This specialization picks up the vital elemental damage boosting talents like Elemental Fury and Lightning Mastery, while still allowing you to be a serviceable healer if necessary. As well, it picks up Tidal Mastery for some bonus critical strike chance. Just like Enhancement, this specialization isn't the best. The key takeaway here is that it's serviceable on shorter duration fights. Once again, as I keep saying, Elemental could not bring anything unique that another Shaman specialization can't. So finally onto Restoration, and notice anything similar in hybrid classes, how the healer specialization always seems to be the go-to, and just like the Druid and to a lesser extent the Paladin, Blizzard decided that the 3 main raid tier sets were all going to be devoted to healing, making it innately a more attractive option. So why Restoration over the other 2 specializations? Well, first they could itemize to heal and maintain totems through stacking many mana per 5 or spirit items as possible. Secondly, they could adapt their specialization to the group they were assigned to, as the main totems were all upgradable through talents. Finally, they just put out very good, consistent heals, especially group healing through Chain Heal. Though this was very mana intensive, few healers were able to put out good group healing, meaning the Shaman was an absolute asset in raids. A Resto Shaman build would look like this. This spec doesn't aim to specialize in totems, and it's focused its talents into raw healing power. This spec also gets mana tied tomes, which means the Shaman specs like this would be placed in a caster group so several other mana users could gain the benefit of this totem. A Shaman in a melee group would spec like this, sacrificing some healing power to pick up enhancing totems, allowing melee classes to be more effective. Points can be moved between Healing Way and Healing Grace depending on whether you are more focused on raid or tank healing, as Chain Heal can generate a lot of threat. Finally, the Enhancement / Resto hybrid sacrifices even more in the restoration tree to pick up improved weapon totems, and the aim of this is to maximise damage of your melee party at the expense of your healing capabilities. 3 out of 3 in Nature's Focus, and Flurry allows you to pick up your Nightfall once again, and melee as much as possible to fish for procs, whilst providing the occasional heal. Points may need to be swapped into Healing Focus where consistent damage is taken, like Velstras. Also, I just want to make an important note on totem twisting. This especially applies to Shamans in melee groups. Dropping a Wind Fury totem provided all party members with a 10-second buff, allowing them to proc Wind Fury, so you're able to swap to a different totem, most likely the Grace of Air totem, to boost their agility levels in between this 10-second Wind Fury window. Also, let's not forget the Tranquil Air totem, which could be weaved in if a melee started to get too close to the main tanking threat. This would reduce threat generated by 20% whilst it was active, and was the Horde counterpart to Blessing of Salvation from Paladins. Unfortunately, it was by default weaker and was often pushed down in value due to the benefits provided by the Shaman's other air totems, leading to more threat problems for the Horde classes. On to PvP now, and while it's overall better news than PvE. First up again, Enhancement. Well, whilst Enhancements certainly have mana issues as well as being super easy at kite, they had something unique which made them really fun. A big, slow, two-handed weapon with Wind Fury. We've all seen the montages and videos. Hop in a battleground, buff yourself up, stroll up to a caster, bang them with a Frost Shock, and then swing in with that auto attack and Storm Strike and see 2 or 3 huge crits pop up on your screen as they disappear in front of you. It really is a glorious sight to see. Rather unfortunately, the Shaman PvP gear wasn't so well itemised to support Enhancement, very little strength or agility on them, or just none, meaning quite a bit of PvE gear would be necessary to sub in to see the huge crits. Saying that, it was very well itemised for Elemental. Elemental, on the other hand, did a lot better in PvP thanks to talents such as Eye of the Storm and Nature's Swiftness. Elemental was about positioning well, kiting through Frost Shock, and Earthbind Totem. Its mail armor and shield also made it reasonably durable versus melee classes. Of course, I can't miss mentioning the unique abilities and utility Shaman bring to a PvP situation. Grounding Totem to avoid many spells, Tremor to remove a number of effects, Poison Cleansing was great versus rogues, even Sentry Totem had some minor uses in battlegrounds to hide in a corner and keep check on where enemy positions are. And finally, Restoration was great, especially when paired up with melee classes. Spamming Purge was a nightmare for Alliance. It had a low cost, remove 2 magic effects a go. On top of this, keep Wind Fury up and you're able to ground or tremor most CC, making them an excellent choice for battlegrounds. Their only issue was no magic to spell against those pesky mages. However, they did have a ranged interrupt in Earthshock, which no other healer could match. On to tier sets, and as mentioned earlier, the 3 main raid tier sets were based around healing. Shaman tier also had really cool names as well, and you can see how the design fits around different elements. Tier 1, the Earth Fury from Molten Core. Whenever I see this set, I'm reminded of Drexthar. The 5-set bonus from this was exceptionally powerful and made it difficult to give up, even when you had access to later tier gear. The average mana it would return to you on a fight was significant, was better than any other source of mana regen at the time. Tier 2, the 10 Storms, taking on a more lightning look, was another great looking set from the Shaman, one of my favourite looking sets in the game actually. And the only issue was that Earth Fury 5 set was so powerful it wasn't really worth upgrading beyond the 3 set for the 10 Storms. Fortunately, the 3 set is the most important part of this tier. The Resto Shaman with 5/8 of tier 1 and 3/8 of tier 2 by Blackwing Lair would be an essential healer and will be able to push out some amazing, consistent heals. And tier 3, the Earth Shatterer, finally definitively outclassed Earth Fury, and all of the set bonuses were super powerful on this, the 2, 4 and 8 giving you better mana efficiency, and the 6 set providing an occasional buff to party members. The buffs it provided were actually pretty substantial at the cost of being fairly short duration. And notice how the warrior gets armor and the druid gets MP5? Blizzard definitely had a vision for what they wanted certain classes to do in raids. So, the Shaman, was it any good though? I would say overall, yes. Shaman is a good class. Any Horde raid will need plenty of them, and in many ways they're a true spiritual counterpart to the Paladin, which, by the way, I've also done a video on. In that the main reason they were brought was to provide buffs, and the buffs they provided were super good. Despite not being so hot in the DPS department, they made up for it in other ways. They were fairly good levelers, they had options in PvP besides just healing, Elemental was reasonable, and Enhancement had good meme spec value with the occasional Wind Fury one-shot. So a word of warning though, Shamans have an absolutely ludicrous number of spells, and though many are only situationally useful, they all have their part, and understanding and being able to press the correct totem quickly is very important. A level 60 Shaman could easily push 40 to 60 keybinds depending on macros, and they had 46 spells by default, so just be aware of that. That's about everything for the Shaman. Let me know what you think, and if you made it this far, good job. See you next time. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye.